You ever spend your whole life being the background noise in your own family? I'm Michael Reed, though no one really called me that growing up. I was just the older one, the quiet one, or worse, the disappointment. Meanwhile, my little sister Rebecca, she was the walking sunbeam, Daddy's princess, Mommy's pride, the golden child in every possible way. When I got into Georgia Tech on a full ride for biomedical engineering, my parents said, "That's nice, honey. Maybe you'll figure things out there." When Rebecca posted a selfie outside Stanford with a latte in one hand and her acceptance letter in the other, they threw her a backyard party. There were banners, balloons, a custom cake that said our star. I watched that celebration from my dorm room with a cup of instant noodles and a midterm on gene editing due in 4 hours. I didn't hate her, not then. I just hated how easy it all was for her. While the first picked up night shifts, coded medical platforms on the side, and lived in borrowed hoodies, she posted yacht parties and wine tours like she was already an influencer. But I stayed focused. While she networked her way into a sales job and got promoted for existing, I built 2 biotech startups from the ground up, sold one for $50 million, the second for $180 M, quietly, on purpose. Why the secrecy? Because when you grow up being told your dreams are too big and your wins are luck, you learn to keep receipts, not applause. So when I joined a mid-sized biotech firm in Boston called Everlyn Therapeutics, I didn't roll in flashing wealth. I came in through the back door. Anonymous resume, mid-level strategist. While Rebecca bragged about closing corporate deals, I was laying the foundation to buy the entire company from underneath everyone's feet. It was subtle, silent, legal. A web of trusts, entities, shell moves. And just 2 months ago, I became the majority shareholder. No press release, no champagne, just a safe in my home office with the documents and a quiet smile on my face. They still think I'm just another guy in a blazer. Let them. The thing about being invisible is, people never see you coming. 2 months after I became the invisible owner of Everlyn Therapeutics, the board offered me a new title, Chief Strategy Officer. They thought they were hiring a brilliant, loyal exec. What they didn't realize? They were handing the keys to the man who already owned the building. I accepted the role with a polite nod and a quiet thank you. No speech, no celebration. Just another brick in a very long, very personal wall I was building. One that kept me focused and my family far, far out. But of course, Rebecca couldn't leave it alone. At our next family dinner, one of those monthly traditions where I mostly listen and chew, she tilted her wine glass and said with that sideways smirk of hers, "Must be nice finally getting a real job, Mike. I hope you're not in over your head. Corporate leadership's a beast." Mom chuckled, like it was some inside joke. Dad offered Rebecca's resume like she was the family's gift to capitalism. Maybe she can coach you through it. She's been managing teams for years. Sure, teams of overpaid charmers in matching polos and buzzword bingo players. But I just smiled and nodded. The game was only beginning. Then came the lunches. Rebecca started dropping by Everlyn. Casual check-ins, she called them. But I watched from my office as she charmed department heads, asked subtle questions, tried to feel out weaknesses, like a shark circling, but with better lipstick and worse intentions. Then came the anonymous tips to HR. Suddenly, whispers about my credentials, my experience, even my degrees. Someone was trying to undermine my authority with forged facts and inflated accusations. Too bad everything they claimed was laughably easy to disprove. But I didn't react, not yet, because I knew Rebecca. She was the type to keep digging, convinced the dirt was there just because she wanted it to be. And she didn't disappoint. What came next was practically cinematic. A sealed envelope sent to Everlyn's board. A full dossier, dressed to impress, polished, slick, fake. Bank records I'd never seen, emails I didn't write, a timeline that painted me as a fraud who'd scammed his way into power. Insider trading, Fake credentials, corporate embezzlement. It was absurd and dangerous. The board called an emergency meeting for Friday. Rebecca announced it at dinner like she was hosting an award show. "The board wants me present," she said, eyes glittering. "There's going to be some changes at the top." No one asked why I wasn't invited. They didn't have to. They'd already decided whose story they believed. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been documenting everything. Every whisper. Every falsified claim. Every time Rebecca tried to cut me down while smiling sweetly across the table. And I still hadn't played my trump card. The one that made every board vote, every accusation, every family smirk, completely irrelevant. Ownership. That Friday, the game wasn't about proving myself. It was about pulling back the curtain and letting them watch the fire burn. The thing about being underestimated is, it makes people sloppy. Rebecca had no idea she was swinging at a wall of reinforced steel. She thought I was made of glass, fragile, ready to crack. She underestimated me. They all did, but I saw it coming. You don't grow up second to the golden child without learning how to read shadows. The pauses in a sentence, the way someone's eyes flicker when you speak, the silence that grows in a room right after you leave it. So when the anonymous tips started trickling into HR, I didn't panic. I documented. When whispers started circulating about falsified degrees, I printed my diplomas and cross-checked who'd accessed my personnel files. When concerned staff raised questions about inflated credentials, I pulled internal audit logs. I even installed a discrete tracking program on the server account that had been used for the bulk of the smear campaign. It wasn't hard. Rebecca never had patience for details, just drama. She was methodical in her malice. I'll give her that. Her fake dossier arrived just 2 days before the emergency board meeting. A sleek manila envelope filled with glossy sheets and tabbed exhibits, labeled in her signature serif font. She didn't even bother anonymizing the formatting. Sloppy. Inside were forged statements, doctored emails, and an entire fabricated timeline that painted me as the villain. Insider trading, wire fraud, you name it. It read like a Netflix crime doc mixed with corporate horror fiction. But the piece de resistance? A fake whistleblower letter, signed only with the letter R subtle. Rebecca was betting everything on this move. At dinner the night before the board meeting, she was practically levitating with smug satisfaction. Her eyes danced as she sipped her wine. Dad asked what the meeting was about, and she just smiled like a bride keeping her wedding dress a secret. "Big changes coming," she said softly. "The company's going to need real leadership now." They all nodded along, like background characters in a movie she was starring in. Like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away, fully aware that they'd already RSVP'd to my downfall. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was ready. Because while Rebecca was busy forging emails and planting rumors, I was building something else entirely. I had my own dossier. Mine wasn't fake. It started with copies of the exact anonymous tips sent to HR, all traced back to the same VPN Rebecca had used to access Everland's internal server 2 months ago. It included screenshots of her calendar, those casual lunches with department heads, logged suspiciously close to internal feedback cycles. There were internal memos I had flagged and tagged. And more importantly, I had had audio. My assistant, Zane, had installed a smart recorder in the executive lounge weeks ago. It was legal. Company policy allowed security monitoring in shared executive areas. And what we picked up? Gold. In one clip, Rebecca chuckled with a senior staffer and said, "Mike's good in the lab, but let's be honest. Strategy isn't his lane. Give it a few months, he'll burn out. Or blow up." Another, "Leadership needs someone who looks the part, who actually fits the mold. Let him tinker in the corner. I'm already fixing his mess." Every word was time-stamped, transcribed, and backed by logs of her visits. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was the ownership reveal. 2 months ago, through a private trust, Redgate Holdings, I quietly acquired a 53% controlling stake in Everlyn Therapeutics. The board thought Redgate was just another silent player. They had no idea it was me. Until now, I stayed up late that night, finalizing every detail. Zane helped me compile the binders, 6 in total, 1 for each board member, neatly labeled, tabbed, indexed. No theatrics, just truth in black and white. I didn't sleep, didn't eat much either, just pored over the timeline again and again, not out of fear but focus. Because this wasn't just about the company. This was about 20 years of being told I was too quiet, too weird, too ambitious, or too much. Rebecca thought she'd orchestrated a corporate coup, but what she really gave me was a microphone. The morning of the meeting, I got to the Boston office early, way before the others. Just wanted to feel the space, breathe it in. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, the one no one knew belonged to the majority stakeholder, and watched the skyline light up in pieces as the sun broke through the haze. At 8:45 a.m., Rebecca walked in through the front entrance like she owned the place. She wore her sharpest blazer, the one with the gold cufflinks. Dad and Mom followed close behind, dressed like they were headed to a press conference or a coronation. She approached the front desk with a high-wattage smile. "We're here for the board session," she said. "It's going to be quite the morning." She didn't know how right she was. From my office upstairs, I watched them be escorted to the executive boardroom. I could practically hear Rebecca rehearsing her victory speech. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, I stood up. Zane met me in the hallway and handed me the binders. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. I nodded once. They wanted a show. Let's give them one they'll never forget. When I pushed open the doors to the executive boardroom at exactly 9:00 a.m., you could have sliced the tension with a scalpel. The board members were already seated, some shifting uncomfortably, others scanning the polished dossier Rebecca had sent in like it was gospel. They didn't look at me. Not yet. Rebecca did. She whipped around in her chair, surprise cracking her confidence for half a second before she recovered. "Michael," she said, eyes narrowing. "This is a closed session. You weren't invited." Her voice was sharp, confident, too confident. I walked calmly to the head of the table. No rush, no raised voice. I placed my leather folder down, opened it, and folded my hands. "Actually," I said, locking eyes with Naomi Patel, the board chair, I invited myself. A murmur spread across the room. A couple board members leaned forward. "It's a bit hard to hold a board meeting," I continued, "without the company's majority owner present." Silence. Rebecca stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. "Excuse me?" she said, forced laughter in her tone. "Everlyn is publicly traded. You don't own the company." "That's not how this works." I turned slightly. "Zane?" Zane stepped into the room, briefcase in hand. Without a word, he began distributing neatly labeled folders to each person at the table. Inside, transfer records, shell company documents, the Redgate Holdings trust structure, and my name. Naomi opened hers first. Her expression shifted slowly. Surprise, confusion, then stillness. One by one, the board members started flipping through the pages. Several paused when they reached the final section, the list of shares consolidated under Redgate, all leading back to me. Rebecca's voice cracked. No, this isn't real. You couldn't have. Everlyn was a public company," I corrected her. "Until 2 months ago, when Redgate Holdings, my trust, quietly acquired a controlling interest. The filings are all there. Verified, legal. Yours, in fact," I said, nodding to Naomi, "were the final sign-off on the purchase." I let that settle. Rebecca was pale. Mom looked like she'd swallowed her pearls. Dad tried, and failed, to close his jaw. But I wasn't done. "Let's move on to the matter of today's meeting," I said, lifting a familiar envelope. the one she'd sent to the board. This contains forged financial records, falsified HR complaints, and a timeline accusing me of everything from insider trading to embezzlement. I placed it in the center of the table. Rebecca Reed authored this, and this morning, we'll walk through every manipulated line, every doctored email, every single attempt she made to destroy not just my career, but the company you all serve. Zane tapped his tablet. A small speaker on the table crackled to life. Then came her voice. Mike's smart, but he's not leadership material, it said. Let's be honest. He's going to crash hard. Better to get in front of that now, before he takes anyone down with him. The next clip played, then another, and another. They weren't angry outbursts or dramatic rants. They were calm, calculated statements, delivered with that exact smile she wore in public. Strategic, polished, and completely damning. Rebecca shrank into her chair, her arms crossed over her chest like armor, but it was no use. I opened my binder and began laying out the facts. A breakdown of her unauthorized access to internal documents, VPN data logs traced to her apartment, calendar overlaps showing her visits coinciding with rumor spikes, and the smoking gun, metadata from the fake bank statements, linked back to a device registered to her corporate email. No detail was too small, because this wasn't a rebuttal, this was a reckoning. This, I said finally, was never about me being unqualified. It was about you not being able to stomach the idea that the brother you spent a lifetime minimizing might have actually outgrown you. Her lip trembled, her voice cracked. I was trying to protect the company, she said weakly. You weren't supposed to. You were never the one they chose. Exactly, I said quietly. They didn't choose me. I chose myself, and I chose to protect this company from you. Mom finally spoke. Michael, please. This is your sister. Surely you're not going to destroy her over some mistakes. I turned to her calmly. She tried to bury me. You stood by and watched. Dad leaned forward. We were supporting Rebecca. No, I said. You were betting on her. Just like always. The golden child. The safe bet. But you didn't see the work I put in. You never asked. You just assumed, like everyone else, that I needed help. I turned back to the board. I request the following be entered into official record. First, that all accusations against me have been reviewed and are verifiably false. Second, that Rebecca Reed's behavior constitutes gross misconduct and attempted sabotage. Naomi looked at me. And what would you like us to do, Mr. Reed? I didn't blink. I want a formal letter sent to her employer. I want this incident logged permanently. I want her banned from Everland property, indefinitely. And I want security to escort her, and both of my parents, out of this building today. Rebecca's voice was a whisper. Michael, please. I stood, closing my binder. You called this meeting to end me. I paused at the door. Turns out it was just your exit interview. Rebecca didn't say another word as security entered the room. Neither did Mom. She just stared at me, with glassy eyes, like she didn't recognize the man standing before her. Dad tried to say something, a weak protest, a plea, maybe, but I didn't listen. I was done listening. Zane stood beside me like a quiet sentinel as the three of them were let out. Rebecca kept her head down, cheeks flushed. Mom's mascara had started to streak. Dad shuffled behind them, hands still gripping the folder that proved, once and for all, he'd bet on the wrong child. And just like that, the meeting was over. Naomi was the first to speak after they were gone. Well, she said, exhaling slowly, that was enlightening. I gave a small nod, collected my documents, and walked out. The following week felt like someone had cracked the air open. Everyone at Everland walked lighter. Tension I hadn't even realized was affecting my team evaporated. Word of what happened spread fast. Not the full story, of course, but enough. The CSO isn't just a strategist. He owns the company. And suddenly, people looked at me differently. Not with fear, with respect. Not because of the title, but because I hadn't just survived a takedown attempt, I'd neutralized it with grace, precision, and enough receipts to make a courtroom jealous. Rebecca, she lost her job within 48 hours. Once her employer reviewed the fabricated documents in the board's statement, they didn't hesitate. Professional sabotage and falsifying evidence tend to make for a bad annual review. As for my parents, that was quieter. At first, they sent messages, half concern, half denial. "We didn't know it had gone that far," Mom wrote. "You should have told us sooner," Dad added in a voicemail. Like this whole thing was a miscommunication, like I'd forgotten to mention that their daughter tried to commit corporate character assassination. But I didn't respond. Then the tone shifted. Guilt dripped into their texts. Invitations to brunch. Questions about rebuilding the family. Subtle hints about how hard things had become since the misunderstanding. I archived every message, didn't block them, didn't reply. Silence, I've learned, is louder than any speech. 3 months later, Zane buzzed my office one night. "Someone's here. Says it's personal." I looked up. "Who?" "Rebecca." I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the skyline for a moment. Then, "Let her in." She looked different. Hair shorter, eyes duller, no designer bag, no gleaming watch. Just a beige coat and a manila envelope clutched in both hands like it might break apart if she let go. She didn't sit. "I'm not staying," she said quietly. "I just came to give you this." She placed the envelope on my desk. I didn't touch it. "It has everything," she said. "Every contact I reached out to, every email I forged, every fake record I created. I'm sending a copy to the board too, and to my old employer." She looked down. "I don't expect forgiveness. I needed to own it." I waited a beat. "Why now?" she exhaled. "Because you were right. I wasn't building anything. I was just performing. And watching you win, quietly, methodically, it broke something in me. But maybe it needed to break." She turned to leave, then paused. "I've started over. Entry level at a startup. No shortcuts this time." And for the first time in my entire life, I saw her without the armor. I nodded slowly. "Send me your resume in a year." She turned, surprised. "Not for a leadership role," I added. "But if you're serious about earning it this time, we're always looking for people who are willing to work their way up." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she smiled faintly. "Thanks." And then she left. 6 months later, Everlyn is flying higher than ever. Our research team secured a federal grant, and we're on track to roll out 2 major biotech solutions in the next quarter. We've hired over 100 new staff, expanded our Boston campus. Sometimes I sit in the corner office, the one I wasn't supposed to have, and watch the sunset paint the skyline. I think about all the versions of me that would have begged for approval, pleaded for attention, longed for validation. But that part of me, he's gone now, and I don't miss him. My parents still send messages, holiday greetings, birthday cards. Mom even dropped a box of family photos at the front desk once. I never opened it. I asked Zane to store it away, somewhere quiet. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. They say family is forever. Maybe. But I've learned that you don't owe love to people who only loved your potential failure, who only showed up to watch you fall. And when they finally realized I wasn't falling, that I never had been, they couldn't handle it. I used to think success was about proving them wrong. Now I know it's about proving myself right. Rebecca sent a holiday card last week. No apology, no guilt, just a short message. "You succeeded not because of us, but despite us. I'm learning to do the same. Thank you." I folded it up and placed it in the drawer beside my first business sale contract. The one my parents never asked about. The one that bought them vacations they never knew I funded. Funny thing about revenge, the best kind isn't loud, or vengeful, or viral. It's the kind that walks away quietly, while everyone else watches the empire you built from the shadows rise into the light. Story 2. You know those holiday movies where families gather around a fire, kids run around with candy canes, and someone starts singing off key until everyone joins in? Yeah, that's not how mine went. My name's Alex. I'm 31. And last Christmas, my family decided literally that I wasn't one of them anymore. Let me rewind. I come from one of those families where there's a star child. In our case, it's my younger brother, Ethan. He's 28, a real charmer, and my parents worship the ground he walks on. Growing up, he could light the house on fire, and they'd blame the match. Meanwhile, if I forgot to take the chicken out of the freezer, I was ruining everyone's lives. Still, I tried. For years. I was the first to graduate, the first to get a decent job, the one who helped with rent when my dad was laid off. But it didn't matter. My wins were invisible. Ethan's bare minimum, framed and celebrated. But whatever, I had made peace with it, or so I thought. Christmas rolled around, and against my better judgment, I showed up. Snow was coming down soft, like a movie set, the kind that should have made the world feel magical. Instead, it felt like I was walking into a pressure cooker. Mom didn't say hi when I came in, just kept stirring gravy like I was some neighbor dropping by. Dad gave me a nod from behind his paper. Ethan? He smirked the second he saw me, like he'd been waiting all year to unleash whatever nonsense he had planned. Dinner was awkward. Fake laughs, forced conversation. I mostly stayed quiet, chewing through dry turkey and the feeling that I didn't belong at that table. Then dessert came, and so did the real show. Ethan leaned back in his chair, fork dangling from his fingers, and said, "Hey Alex, guess what? We took a vote last week." I paused, mid-sip of coffee. "A vote?" "Yeah," he said, smile widening. "You weren't there, obviously, but we had a little family vote. Unanimous, by the way." I looked around. Mom was suddenly fascinated with her plate. Dad wouldn't meet my eye. Even my cousin Sarah giggled awkwardly. Ethan grinned. "You're officially out. Not part of the family anymore." I didn't say anything at first. I just let the words sink in, let the silence stretch. Their laughter felt distant, muffled, like someone had dunked my head underwater. Then I stood up. "That's cool," I said, calm, too calm. "I'm just honoring the vote then." Mom finally looked up, panic flickering across her face. "Alex, wait." But I was already at the door, coat half on. Ethan called something after me, but I didn't catch it, or care to. As I stepped into the snow, I realized something. They weren't joking. Not really. Maybe Ethan thought it was a laugh, but my parents, who didn't object, didn't even flinch. They meant it in their own twisted way. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked down the street, snow collecting on my shoulders, wondering how I'd become the outsider in my own bloodline. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, a half-hearted, "We were just messing around" from Ethan. I ignored them all. Instead, I packed a bag and crashed at my friend Marcus's place for a few days. He listened, didn't offer fake sympathy, just handed me a beer and said, "You deserved better, man. Always did." And I believed him. After that, I went dark. No texts, no calls. I wanted them to feel it, the silence, the absence. Let them see what life looked like without me. The thing is, when people think they can discard you, they never expect you to leave with your head held high. They expect a scene, a breakdown, a meltdown. But I gave them none of that. Instead, I started thinking. Not revenge, not exactly, but something better, clarity. I started rebuilding. Quietly, reaching out to the people who actually mattered. People who checked in, asked if I was okay, showed up for coffee or late-night vent sessions. My circle wasn't big, but it was solid. No performance, no conditions. Meanwhile, the first posted casual photos me laughing at trivia night, hiking, grabbing dinner with friends. Nothing flashy, just living. And then, like clockwork, the guilt messages started. My parents asked if I wanted to come talk. Ethan texted something snide like, You gonna be dramatic forever? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I wasn't interested in a conversation. I was building something they couldn't touch. Still, I wasn't done. Because there's something about being voted out of your family like you're on a bad reality show that sticks with you. Burns in your chest long after the cameras stop rolling. So I made a plan. And let's just say when I called that family dinner a few weeks later, the one I hosted, I already knew how it was going to end. I don't know what surprised them more, that I reached out, or that I was the one setting the table. The dinner invite went out 2 weeks after the vote. Just a text, short and polite. Dinner at my place next Friday, 7 p.m. Everyone's welcome. Ethan responded within minutes. What's the catch? I didn't reply. I think curiosity got the best of them. That, or the fact that they'd never seen me take charge like this. Either way, when Friday rolled around, they all showed up. My place isn't huge, but it's clean. Warm. Mine. I'd cooked. Nothing fancy, just good food. I even had wine ready. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted their guard down. The room was quiet at first. The kind of quiet where you can hear forks tapping plates. Nobody said anything outright, but I could feel the tension. It sat heavy in the space between the polite small talk. About halfway through the meal, Ethan finally spoke. So, what's this really about? I smiled, poured myself a little more wine. Just wanted to catch up. Share a meal. He snorted. You've ignored us for weeks. Don't act like this is a friendly get-together. I set down my fork and looked him in the eye. You're right, it's not. Silence. My parents froze. My cousin Sarah, who had come along mostly out of obligation, stared at her plate. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, like he was gearing up for a fight. You all made it very clear where I stand in this family, I said, keeping my voice steady. So I thought it was time I showed you where I stand now. Ethan rolled his eyes. Still on this? Dude, it was a joke. No, I said. It was a moment of clarity. You just didn't expect me to take it seriously. My dad cleared his throat like he was going to say something, probably to pivot or placate, but I cut him off. You don't get to vote someone out of the family and then act surprised when they start treating you like strangers. Ethan's smirk faltered. So what? This is a guilt trip? I shook my head. This is a wake-up call. And that's when the doorbell rang. I think they thought it was a friend, or maybe someone late to dinner. What they didn't expect was who walked in: my lawyer. Dressed sharp, holding a small folder under his arm, calm as the snow falling outside. My mom blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Who is this? He nodded politely. Evening. I won't take much of your time. I'm just here to deliver a few documents on behalf of Alex. My dad bristled. What kind of documents? Just some formal paperwork, the lawyer said. Nothing aggressive, just clarifying boundaries, legal and financial. He set the folder gently on the table. My mom stared at it like it might explode. Ethan scoffed. This is ridiculous. What? You're suing the family now? No, I said. I'm protecting myself. That's all. The lawyer stepped aside. He didn't need to say more. Everything was spelled out in black and white. I'd officially separated myself from any future obligations: estate, inheritance, shared assets, emergency contacts, everything. Clean slate. My mom's voice cracked. Alex, this isn't how families handle things. I looked at her, really looked at her. No, Mom, this is how I handle things now. Ethan stood, pacing. You're so dramatic. You think this makes you powerful? I think it makes me free, I said. You voted me out. I'm just making it official. He stopped in front of me, hands clenched. You think you're better than us? No, I said quietly. I just finally believe I deserve better than this. The silence that followed hit harder than any scream. They weren't used to me speaking like this. Calm, certain, unshakable. My lawyer gave me a nod and quietly left. I stood there for a second, listening to the heater hum, the snow ticking softly against the window. And then I looked around. You all made a choice that night. You thought I'd break down. You thought I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. I built something without you. My dad stared at the documents like they could explain everything away. It was just a joke, he muttered. No, I said. It was a line in the sand, and you crossed it. My mom started crying softly, but I didn't comfort her. Not out of cruelty, just reality. I wasn't going to keep bleeding just to make them comfortable. Ethan? He looked shaken. Like for the first time, he realized I wasn't bluffing. He opened his mouth to say something, then shut it again. I didn't need an apology. I wasn't chasing some teary reconciliation scene. I just needed space, ownership of my life. And they were finally seeing what that looked like. You don't have to like it, I said, grabbing my glass, but you're gonna have to live with it. And I sat down again. I think that was what got them most, that I didn't storm out, that I stayed calm, that I was still hosting, still standing, still whole. They finished dinner in silence, and when they left one by one, awkward, quiet, unsure, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt peace, not because I'd won anything, but because I finally knew I didn't need their approval anymore. The house was quiet after they left. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet where you're waiting for something to happen. No, this one felt clean, honest, like the air had shifted and I could finally breathe again. I washed the dishes slowly, didn't rush. I even played a little music while I wiped the counters down, something soft and wordless. I wasn't thinking about revenge or winning or who felt what when they walked out the door. I was just here, in my own space, my own life, and that meant something. Over the next few weeks, I didn't hear much from them. A few texts here and there, mostly short, mostly confused. Can we talk? You didn't have to go this far. We didn't mean it like that. But none of them said the one thing I was waiting for. We're sorry. Instead, it was the usual they wanted to talk so they could feel better. Not because they actually understood. So I didn't answer. Not out of spite. I just didn't have anything left to give them. What surprised me most wasn't their silence, it was mine. How easy it became to move on once I stopped expecting anything from them. The world didn't end. My days kept going. I still had work, my friends, my Sunday coffee runs. I started cooking more, reading, sleeping better. Sometimes people think walking away is the hardest part. But honestly, staying was harder. Every holiday that passed after that felt lighter. I spent New Year's Eve with Marcus and his girlfriend, two people who never treated me like an afterthought. We made tacos, watched bad movies, toasted to things we couldn't say out loud. It wasn't fancy, it was real. And in that space, I started seeing things differently. I realized I had spent so many years trying to earn love that should have been given freely, trying to shrink myself into something easier for them to accept. But all that did was break me in pieces. Letting go wasn't weak. It wasn't dramatic. It was survival. A few months later, I ran into my cousin Sarah at a bookstore. She looked nervous, like maybe I was going to yell or cause a scene. Instead, I just said hi. She apologized. Genuinely. Said she didn't realize how bad things were until she saw my face that night when Ethan made his little vote announcement. She said, "You didn't deserve that." I nodded. I know. We talked a bit. Nothing too deep. Just enough to let her know there was no bad blood. I didn't hate her. I just didn't need to carry the weight of their silence anymore. The rest of the family, they stayed quiet. Maybe out of guilt, maybe pride. Probably both. But one thing was clear, they knew the old rules didn't apply anymore. Ethan tried once more. Called me out of the blue one evening. I stared at the screen for a second, then answered. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted him to hear who I was now. "Hey," he said. "Listen, about all that. You know we were just messing around, right?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. "You can call it a joke if that helps you sleep," I said. But we both know what it really was. He was quiet for a second. Then he said something that stuck with me. "You've changed." "Yeah," I said. I had to. He hung up after that. No big goodbye. Just the click of someone realizing the story had moved on without them. And it had. By spring, I had fully untangled myself from everything emotionally, legally, financially. There was nothing tying me back anymore. I moved to a new apartment. Nothing fancy, but it had big windows and sunlight in the morning. I bought a small plant and named it after a joke from childhood that only I remembered. It bloomed anyway. People always ask, do you miss them? The truth? Some days, yeah, not because they were good to me, but because I miss the idea of them. The version of family I thought I had or hoped I could earn. But the real version? The one where I was disposable? No, I don't miss that at all. I've made new memories since then. Birthdays with people who show up on time. Random texts from friends just checking in. Warm meals. Cold nights by the window, watching the snow fall without feeling like I'm on the outside looking in. I don't need a big moment to prove I've healed. I don't need to win anything. I just needed to remember who I was before they convinced me I was less. And now, I remember. So, if you're wondering how it ends, it doesn't, really. Not in the fairy tale sense. They keep doing what they do. I keep living how I live. And the silence between us, it's not cold. It's peaceful. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's just walking away and not looking back. Story 3. I used to think I'd take over the family business one day. My dad, Leonard, ran a mid-sized lab supply company he'd built from the ground up. And for nearly a decade, I, Miles, now 32, had been groomed for the role. Or at least, that's what I believed. The signs were all there. He had me shadow him during leadership meetings, sent me to trade shows, let me lead internal projects. He even made comments at family dinners about keeping it in the bloodline. I wasn't just an employee, I was his son and the presumed successor. Then came the retirement party. I planned it myself, booked the venue, curated a slideshow, even wrote a little speech about how proud I was of everything he'd built and how excited I was to carry it forward. Classic eldest son moment, right? Except I wasn't the one taking over. At the end of his speech, right as I was clapping along with the crowd like a dumbass, he dropped the bomb. The new CEO wouldn't be me, it'd be my brother-in-law, Dean. Dean, who had been in the company barely over a year. Dean, who married my sister Julia 3 years ago and had coasted through every position he'd been handed since. I remember the moment in vivid detail. My drink halfway to my lips, the polite smile frozen on my face, and my stomach dropping so hard I thought I'd puke on the dessert table. But I kept clapping, because that's what you do in front of 100 people and a father who just blindsided you. After the applause died down, I cornered him outside. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Not angrily, just confused, gutted. His response was worse than I expected. He said Dean was more of a son to him than I'd ever been. I should have walked away right then. But I stood there, silent, trying to process the gut punch while he explained why I wasn't CEO material. According to him, I was too mentally fragile, too soft. He said he needed someone resilient to carry the company forward, someone who wouldn't fold under pressure. What he really meant, my anxiety, a diagnosis I'd stupidly, naively confided in him just months earlier. One evening over dinner, I'd accidentally dropped a bottle of my meds on the floor. My mom had asked about it, and I told the truth: generalized anxiety, treated, under control. My work never suffered. Hell, I'd never missed a deadline, let alone a deal. Mom had hugged me. Dad had stared like I'd grown a second head. That night, he said I'd disappointed him by showing weakness. Told me real leaders don't need pills. That I should have toughed it out like a man. Apparently, that conversation sealed my fate. I left the party early, didn't say goodbye, didn't make a scene. I just slipped out while Dean and Julia were basking in applause. And I never spoke to my father again. I quit a week later. He didn't try to stop me. Julia called once, told me I was overreacting, that Dad had his reasons, and that Dean was just doing what he was asked. We fought. She told me to grow up. I blocked her. We haven't spoken since. My only link to the family was my mom. Sweet, exhausted from playing peacekeeper mom. We kept in touch, met up for lunch once a month. She always tried to patch things up between me and Dad, but I wasn't interested. I couldn't forgive someone who thought my mental health made me unfit to lead. Fast forward 2 years. Last week I got a frantic call from her. She said Dean had been arrested. Tax fraud. Money laundering. Apparently, some sketchy offshore dealings had finally caught up to him. And now, because my dad still sat on the board as a retired founder, he was being dragged into the mess. I didn't even feel surprised. Just numb. She begged me to help. To talk to my dad. Maybe even testify if needed, since I knew the inner workings of the company. Said I was the only one who could save the family. I told her no. Blunt and final. I wanted no part of it. If Dad had made his bed with Dean, he could lie in it. I'd spent years trying to be good enough, only to be discarded for someone who tanked the company in record time. Why the hell would I stick my neck out now? She called me selfish, petty, said I was letting ancient wounds get in the way of doing the right thing. I told her it wasn't ancient. It was still bleeding. She hung up on me. I texted her later to apologize for how cold I sounded, but the message never delivered. She blocked me. And that's how I lost the last bridge I had left to my family. After Mom blocked me, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I mean, she'd been the only one from my family who still reached out, who still tried. We weren't close like we used to be, but at least there was something. Some thread that reminded me I still had a mother. Now, silence. I didn't text again. Didn't call. I figured she needed space. Maybe I did too. Still, it felt like the universe had flipped a switch and turned the last bit of warmth I had left ice cold. I didn't cry or rage or anything dramatic. I just kind of sat with it. You know that weird calm after everything explodes? When all that's left is quiet and the hum of your fridge? That was me. Then, 2 days later, my sister showed up. Just showed up. No warning. Knocked on my door like it was normal. I stared at her through the peephole for a good minute before opening the door. She looked rough. Eyes red, makeup smudged, like she hadn't slept in days. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice cracking. I should have said no, but I stepped aside and let her in. She walked in slowly, looking like she wasn't sure if she'd be welcomed or thrown out. I didn't offer coffee or tea or small talk, just sat across from her and waited. She broke down almost immediately, said she had no idea what Dean was doing, swore up and down that she didn't know about the fraud, said if she had, she would have stopped him. I didn't say much, just listened, because honestly, I wasn't sure what to believe. But she wasn't here just to apologize. That became obvious pretty quick. She wanted help, not emotional support, not forgiveness, help. Apparently, word had spread that one of the VPs at my current company was married to a federal judge. And now my family, my dad and Dean specifically, were hoping I'd use that connection. You read that right. After cutting me out, after dismissing me, they wanted me to reach out to someone I barely knew through work to help clean up their mess. She said they'd pay anything, that they just wanted a chance to explain themselves to someone who could make a difference. I stared at her. She really thought I'd say yes. I told her, straight up, that I wasn't going to risk my job, reputation, or ethics to help two people who had never once cared about mine. And more importantly, I didn't want to. Not even a little bit. I told her that I couldn't pretend nothing happened. That helping them wasn't just some favor, it would have meant betraying myself all over again. And I was done doing that. She got defensive fast, said I was holding a grudge, that I was still bitter over something that wasn't even Dean's fault. That ticked me off. I reminded her that I'd never actually blamed Dean, not fully. I knew it was our father who made that decision. Dean just accepted it. I mean, who wouldn't? You're offered a CEO chair with 0 qualifications. You don't exactly say, "No thanks, give it to the guy who earned it." But blaming me for not stepping in to help now? That wasn't fair. She kept pushing. Said I was proving Dad right by being too emotional and too selfish. That one stung. Not because it was true, but because it was his voice coming out of her mouth. I asked her to leave. Told her I needed space. She didn't take it well. Said more things she probably didn't mean. Stormed out and slammed the door behind her. And just like that, another bridge went up in flames. You'd think that'd be the end of it. But 3 days later, my parents showed up at my door. Both of them. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. But they saw me through the window, and I didn't feel like dragging it out. So I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Arms crossed, body tense. "I'm not here to beg," Dad said. "Good," I replied, "because you're not getting anything." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I swear, the world froze for a second. He didn't try to justify it, didn't blame anyone else. Just said he made a terrible call 2 years ago, that he let fear and pride blind him. That growing up in his family, emotions were considered a weakness, and he carried that into how he judged me. Said he didn't understand anxiety, thought it meant I couldn't handle pressure. But over the last couple years, watching everything fall apart under someone he thought could handle it, he started to question that belief, started reading more, talking to people, even saw a therapist a few times apparently. He said he realized he messed up not just as a leader but as a dad. And then he said the words I never thought I'd hear from him. "You deserved better from me." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not right there. Not like that, but something shifted. He looked older, smaller, like he'd finally taken off the armor he'd always worn. Mom spoke up after that. Said she was sorry too, for pushing me, for not trying harder to understand what I was going through. She said she missed me, that no matter what happened, I'd always be her son. I didn't cry, didn't yell, just stood there, trying to process everything. Eventually, I told them I appreciated the apology, but I wasn't ready to come back to anything. I needed time. And even with time, I wasn't sure things would ever go back to the way they were. They understood. They left without pushing, without guilt tripping, without trying to bargain. And that, more than anything, made me believe the apology might have been real. It's been a few months since that doorstep conversation, since my dad apologized, since my mom stood beside him and admitted she'd been wrong too. And I've been thinking, a lot. Forgiveness, I've realized, doesn't look like what movies tell you. There's no big family hug with music swelling in the background. It's not about pretending things didn't happen. It's more like deciding whether the pain can be something you carry without letting it poison everything else. So, I started slow. Dinner once a month. That was the deal. No promises, no expectations. Just dinner. The first one was awkward. I'm not gonna lie. My dad didn't know whether to crack a joke or apologize again, so he did a weird mix of both. My mom overcompensated, too many questions, too much food, like she was hosting a peace summit. But it wasn't terrible. We kept doing it. And little by little, it stopped feeling like a forced performance and more like old family habits, but quieter, gentler. Dean wasn't there, not even mentioned. My sister? She came later. She showed up at my place about a month after that first dinner. She looked more put together this time, said she'd filed for divorce, that Dean had been fired, and the investigation was still ongoing, but he was facing serious consequences. "I should have listened to you back then," she said. "I should have stood by you." Her voice cracked when she said it, not in a performative way, just human, tired, regretful. I didn't jump to hug her. Didn't say it's okay like it was nothing. I told her I appreciated the apology, that I'd need time, and she nodded. So now it's monthly dinners with my parents and the occasional coffee with Julia. It's not perfect. I still flinch sometimes when Dad slips into his old tough guy tone. Sometimes Mom says something like, "Well, at least we're all back together now." and I have to swallow the urge to remind her we're not quite there yet. But we're something. We're trying. My dad offered me the CEO position again a few weeks ago. Just laid it out there like, the role is still yours if you want it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel bitter when he said it. I just felt calm. I told him I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That surprised him. I think he expected me to jump at the chance. But I've got a good thing going where I'm at. Great coworkers. A promotion on the horizon. And most importantly, I feel respected. Not because of who my dad is, but because of who I am. I'm not saying I'll never take the reins. Just not today. Right now, I'm building a life that's mine, on my terms. And part of that life, it includes someone new. Well, not new exactly. An old friend. We'd been close for years, but never crossed that line. I think I always held back, afraid to screw up something good. But she didn't. She asked me out one night straight up, no games. Said, "You've been through hell, and you still have the kindest eyes I've ever seen. That deserves dinner." We've been together ever since. She's the reason I even considered reconnecting with my family. Said something I keep coming back to. You can't force forgiveness, but you can decide if you want peace more than you want the last word. So here I am, still healing, still sorting through everything that happened, but lighter than I was before. I used to think closure meant justice, or revenge, or at least a public apology that went viral on some kind of karmic scoreboard. Turns out, it looks a lot more like boundaries, like saying no without guilt, like choosing your own happiness without needing to burn someone else's house down on the way out. I still remember what my dad said the night of that retirement party. Those words don't just disappear. But now, they don't own me. I own my story now. Every quiet victory, every step forward, every boundary that stayed firm. And if my family wants to be part of that story, they'll have to keep showing up, keep choosing growth, keep respecting who I am, not who they wanted me to be. That's not revenge, that's healing. And maybe for the first time in my life, that's enough.